Welcome into episode 15 of the Print Fest DFS podcast. My name is Justin Rue alongside Scott Bandy, and we're going to be breaking down the week 13 main slate on Draftkings. It's a slate where there's quite a few injuries that we have to kind of maneuver through. There's a good amount of value. There's a couple punt tight ends, which we always like. Uh, there's one cheaper quarterback, and there's a couple. There's a running back play that we all want to throw up when we look at him. A couple of cheap wide receiver plays with Will Fuller, being out from steroids or whatever he was doing. So it should be a fun slate to break down. So
Yeah,
starting
it's a
with
lot less ugly than last week.
yeah, last week was God. It was not much there last week. So I want to start with the injuries. So there's a couple guys that are out already here on Friday night. So Josh Jacobs is ruled out. He didn't practice at all this week, so that opens up Devontae Booker, who is 5,500, the same price as David Montgomery. So we'll talk about that. Jonnu Smith is out, opening up 2,500. Anthony MF and Ferkser, we will be talking about him. Irv Smith is also out. Did not practice all week. Opening up Kyle Rudolph at 3,400 again. We played him last week at 2,800. He's definitely in play again at 3,400. Julio Jones is questionable. Tua is also questionable. So that's just Tua kind of changes the entire offense with Miami. Is like if Tua's out and Gaskin is out, they're just going to throw 40 times with Fitz, and Parker's definitely to be further into play. If Tua plays, I don't want anybody on the the Dolphins at all. So,
yeah, I totally agree. If Tua plays, then I'm off all Miami players.
And I think Tua's going to be good at some point in his career. He's just not ready yet.
Well, that's why we love Fitz, because he just drops back and slings it, man. He just doesn't care.
Yeah, and we should also note that Zach Ertz is trending towards being active. He's not on the injury report, so he should be good to go. I think Ertz is total dust. He's 3,900. I think more so it just kind of hurts Goddard. It probably does help the Eagles' offense. It gives gives Wentz someone else to throw the ball to, but we know Ertz is going to get nothing after the catch. But it might actually help the Eagles' offense, give a familiar face for Carson Wentz. Maybe he starts to get something turned around. I don't know what the Eagles are going to do, but we're going to start at the quarterback position like we always do. And I'm going to start with he's my second favorite quarterback on the slate. You're going to talk about my first favorite quarterback on the slate. But I'm going to talk about Kirk Cousins. So Captain Kirk, he's really been super efficient this year. We know his volume hasn't quite always been there, but in this spot at home, he's 6,400 taking on Jacksonville. They have the highest implied total on the main slate, 31, which is obviously ridiculous. Anything over like 27 is really solid for quarterbacks. We know that the Vikings like to lean on the run. On early downs in the first half in the last 3 weeks, they run the ball 50% of the time. So that's, league average. Most teams throw the ball, right around like 54% of the time. So, they're out there running the ball 50% of the time. So we know this team likes to lean on the run. But I mean, Kirk has still been fine. I mean, he's averaged 21 DraftKings points per game over his last 5. He's even pushed the ball downfield a little bit. His average at the target is 9. And he's averaged 9.1 yards per attempt in his last 5. So he's been really solid. He gives you like nothing on the ground. He's not going to run the ball at all. But he's taking on this Jacksonville defense that we know is just a stone worst. I mean, they're 31st DVOA. They get no pressure on the opposing passer, and they give up 8.3 yards per attempt. So we know the efficiency is going to be there for Captain Kirk. He's been a top 12 quarterback in 3 straight games. So I think that he has a really solid floor here. I'm not sure what his ceiling is going to be if Jacksonville can't keep pace in this game.
Yeah, Captain Kirk, man. I'm having a hard time getting on board with this just because I have an internal fear of Kirk Cousins and Mike Zimmer. I mean, I know there's a lot of talk about, scaling back Dalvin Cook's workload with his injury right now, but Whenever I think of Mike Zimmer, I just think, man, if we get up by anything, we're just going to jam it down their throat, whether it's Dalvin or Madison or anybody. So he had the volume's been there the last few weeks, and he's always been good. I mean, back when he was on Washington, he was one of my favorite quarterbacks just because he would drop back, 35, 40 times, just get it done. But man, the Vikings, it's such a good spot, and I have little to no faith in the Jags, even though they have been honestly doing a lot of a better job of keeping games close than I thought they would.
Yeah.
But I'm just fearful that they get up 14-0 and they just sit on it. And I think I would be more inclined to play Kirk if he was less than 6K, but him being 6,400, I could be totally wrong. He could absolutely smash here. But it's just like an internal fear of mine of Mike Zimmer and his quarterback.
Yeah, and Adam Thielen is going to be back for this game. He was on the COVID list last week. He was out. So he's got two really solid weapons there with Thielen and with Justin Jefferson. So, I mean, I do like Aaron Rodgers more, but if you don't have the salary to get up to Aaron Rodgers, I think Kirk Cousins is fine.
Yeah, I mean, granted, I looked into Jacksonville earlier today, and their defense is just so bad against quarterbacks. I think they're giving up the third most fantasy points over the last 4 weeks to quarterbacks, despite seeing far less volume through the air than the other teams in the top five. And we know the quarterback efficiency for DFS often reigns superior to volume. And I mean, that's been the story of Kirk Cousins this year. So he absolutely could get it done on, 25, 30 pass attempts. My fear is the 16 for 22,
Yeah.
that kind of game. So, but yeah, I'll be happy to take an L if he buries me. But anyways, moving on to both our favorite guy this week is Aaron Rodgers at 6,800. I think he's just really underpriced this week. He's having, I mean, quite possibly the best season of his career after what a lot of people thought was a down season last year. So just to start it off, Green Bay's a 9-point home favorite, over under to 49. That total has actually moved up about 1.5 since Monday. They have a 29 implied team total, which is really, really solid. Now, the Philadelphia defense, when you look into the numbers, they are allowing the 8th fewest fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks over the last 4 weeks. But if you look into who they've played Dallas, the Giants, and the Browns. And then the Seahawks, where we all watched Russ struggle. But, I mean, Dallas, the Giants, and Cleveland, none of them really have competent passing offenses. Andy Dalton is bleh. I mean, Daniel Jones has struggled all year. Baker has had flashes, but, man, they just run the ball so much that I think when you look into the numbers, it might actually be a little bit misleading in regard to Philly's defense. A couple notes about that defense. Fletcher Cox is probably not going to play. He's second on the team in sacks and arguably their best defensive player. So that's going to reduce some pressure off of Aaron Rodgers in this game if he does inevitably end up sitting. And then secondly, Darius Slay has been limited at practice the last 2 days. I didn't actually see any info about Friday's practice, but, man, if he doesn't play, that just depletes a poor secondary even more. And, man, I mean, he can't cover Devontae Adams. We know that. But, man, if Devontae Adams gets to go against that secondary without Darius Slay, I mean, man, that's just an absolute smash. So I really have no concerns about this Philly defense. I think they're overrated. I think the numbers say that. Going back to Rodgers, I mean, he's only had one game this season under 19 fantasy points and only 2 under 23 fantasy points. So, I mean, it's 6.8K. I mean, he's only not hit value once. So that's really, really solid. And then really the only concern I have at all in this spot is that we get an Aaron Jones ceiling game, but you can't project something like that. I mean, if Aaron Jones goes out and scores 3 or 4 touchdowns, yeah, Rodgers isn't going to get there. But, man, outside of that, I see no way how this is not just a blow-up spot for Rodgers.
Yeah, I mean, So you mentioned the Eagles injury. So Fletcher Cox, he was limited today and he's off the injury report, so he's going to play. Darius Slay has a calf injury. He's been limited all week. He was limited today and he is questionable. So there's a chance that Darius Slay could actually miss this game. Yeah, I mean, on your Aaron Jones note, I mean, the Eagles are a pass funnel. They only give up 3.4 yards per carry to opposing backs. So this is a team that really can stop the run pretty well and should force the Packers to the air. I mean, and when you force Aaron Rodgers to the air, I mean, you're going to be in trouble.
You're
So
dead.
yeah, I mean, I think and Aaron Rodgers, um, he's been a top 8 quarterback in every game except for 2, and one of those came against Tampa Bay. And when Tampa Bay just blitzed the crap out of him, and he could get nothing going. Um, so I think that Aaron Rodgers, the floor is absolutely massive. The ceiling should be perfectly fine here if the Eagles can punch back at all to keep this game, somewhat close. I think Aaron Rodgers is the best play on the slate at his price, 6,800.
Yeah, I think he's probably going to be pretty. He'll probably be the highest owned on the slate. Him and Cousins, I think, will easily be the 2 highest.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of quarterbacks on the slate that can run. Um, Russ is on the slate. Kyler's got the busted shoulder. Yeah, I think that Rodgers will definitely.
I don't think people are going to want to play. I think people are going to stay away from Watson too with no 4.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so moving on to running back, I think that running back is pretty tight this week. I think there's 5 main guys, and we can just list them off. So I think the most locked in play is Austin Eckler. So it's Austin Eckler, Derrick Henry, and Dalvin Cook up top. James Robinson around the same price as Austin Eckler, and then David Montgomery if you want to go down. Now, people are going to say Devontae Booker is in play here with no Josh Jacobs, but Jalen Richard might siphon off some passing game stuff. Who knows if they activate Theo Riddick? Devontae Booker is not some world beater. He's not some great guy. And I know David Montgomery, who's the same price as him, is not some world beater either. But I think that David Montgomery's role is exactly what you're wishing for in Devontae Booker. You don't know that Devontae Booker is going to go out there and get 80% of the snaps. We know for a fact that David Montgomery is going to get 80+% of the snaps. He's going to get about 19 touches with 4 to 5 targets in the passing game. And David Montgomery's been decent enough. He actually had a blow up game last week, against Green Bay, and now he's taking on this Detroit defense that's 31st in total yards allowed per game to opposing backfields. They're giving up 166 yards per game to opposing backfields, and they've allowed a league high 21 touchdowns to running backs, and they give up 34 fantasy points per game to opposing backs on 4.6 yards per carry. This is the spot of spots for Dave Montgomery at 5,500 as a home favorite with a 24 implied total, which is good enough. Mitch Trubisky's back there, but this is the spot for David Montgomery at 5,500. I much prefer him to Devontae Booker. What about you?
So this is the type of spot for David Montgomery that gives me serious trust issues. I remember I played him like week 7 or so, and I was super hesitant to do so because he's burnt me so much in the past, and he's just fat and slow, and he sucks. And I would, most of the time, want nothing to do with Montgomery, and I pledged that I would never ever play him in cash ever again. But man, that price tag and his recent involvement in the passing game, it makes it impossible to not at least consider.
Yeah.
But this just, and I'm probably going to end up playing him because he is so cheap. But this is like that game where I just see 13 carries for 18 yards or something, like something stupid like that that only David Montgomery would do in this spot. So yeah, this is, if I play David Montgomery and he loses me money again, I don't think I'll ever be able to recover from that. I mean, twice in a few week time span. But yeah, it's the best spot he's going to have all year. Detroit is absolutely
Dreadful.
They're just putrid on defense. So it's impossible to not at least consider. And I agree on the Booker take. Montgomery's workload is exactly what you want for Booker. But the issue is we don't know what Jalen Richard, what kind of workload he's going to see. Is Booker going to be on the field on third down, or is he going to be out there running routes? We know Montgomery is.
Yeah.
So that's the differentiator between those two for me.
Yep. 100%.
So one of the, I think the most interesting play on the slate is Derrick Henry at 9,200. So it's December 4th. It's officially D-Hember season, which say what you want, but I think it's an actual thing. When the weather turns cold, Derrick Henry, man, the beast gets unleashed. But here's the thing: I don't have the stones to fade a chalky Derrick Henry in December, and I know I don't have the stones, and I'm just gonna state that outright right now. So, man, looking into the numbers, 256 carries this year is by far the most in the league. 1,257 rushing yards is by far most in the league. His percent of team rushing attempts is top 5 in the league. He has 50 red zone carries, which is by far the most in the league. He has 14 money zone carries. It's second in the league to Dalvin, I think. 12 touchdowns, second in the league to Dalvin. And now it's December, man. I mean, he has 256 attempts in 11 games. That is just, he's on pace for like 380 carries. Like, it's just,
Yeah.
it's seemingly unsustainable. But the thing is, until he gets hurt, that's just what they're going to do. And it's at least interesting. And I don't know how much stake you can put into this, but Mike Vrabel did come out and said they need to get him more involved in the passing game. And I don't like to really give too much of a thought to coach speak because that's often what it is coach speak. But it's at least interesting. He has been running a route on about half of Tannehill's dropbacks, 16 on 31 dropbacks against Baltimore, and then 10 on 22 dropbacks versus Indy. And Jeremy McNichols has essentially been phased out. He's only ran 4 routes the last 2 weeks. So really, if a running back's going to get a target in this game, it's probably going to be Derrick Henry. Now, granted, like we've seen all year, that might just culminate into 2 targets, and that's really the problem with Derrick Henry. He has the highest ceiling on the slate at the running back position, and it's not close. But his floor is just not that safe. I mean, let's say he gets 26 carries, 120 yards, no touchdowns, 1 catch. And you and I have talked about this a couple times this week. I mean, 120 yards plus the bonus, that's 15 points plus 1 catch for 10 yards or so. Okay, we're talking about 17 points at a $9,200 price tag. That's a great game for most people, but when you're not involved in the passing game, that is, and you pay that price tag for Derrick Henry,
Yeah.
you're dead. Like, he's going to have to score twice and hit the bonus at least to really hit value. And while that is well in his range of outcomes, it's really, really hard to expect that, even when it's Derrick Henry in December. And it's really difficult because he's probably, for my money, going to be the highest owned running back on the slate. And that is terrifying for both the people who play him and the people who fade him. Because one play from this guy, 85-yard rushing touchdown, or he takes a 75-yard screen to the house. I mean, that is terrifying. And it can win you money or it can lose you money. And I absolutely hate it when one guy breaks the slate. So he is easily the most interesting player on the slate. I don't have the stones to fade him. If he is going to be as chalky as it's looking like, it's just terrifying. If he's less than owned by a quarter of the field, then I feel okay fading him. But man, I think it's terrifying. What do you think?
Yeah, Derrick Henry is always this guy that just has like this massive ceiling and just has a cratering of floor, especially at this price now. I mean, he's getting up there with guys like Dalvin Cook, guys that are actually used in the passing game a little bit. I mean, look, I mean, the guy is literally averaging 1.8 targets per game over his last 5. So he's basically like not involved at all in the passing game. But he's just been so efficient. We know how good he is. I mean, this Browns defense is right around average. I mean, this is an average defense. They give up 4.1 yards per attempt. So they only give up 22 Draftkings points per game to opposing running backs. But this spot, I mean, their implied total is 30. They're at home, 6-point favorite.
Highest
Yeah,
total.
and this is we know the Titans love to lean on the run. Over the last 3 weeks and early downs in the first half, they run the ball 63% of the time, and league average is 47%. So this is a team that really just wants to feature Derrick Henry, and they're going to do it. I mean, he's averaged 23.4 touches per game over his last 5. So he's just absolutely their centerpiece of the offense. But on the other side, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt are the centerpieces of the Browns. So this might turn into a game where it's just kind of a slugfest and they're just running the ball a lot. And it could speed up this game and the game could end in like 2 hours and you don't even get enough volume from either side to even get there. That could happen. Or these teams could start to tilt towards the air, start using play action off these guys, and this game could shoot out. I could see either of those things happening. Derrick Henry at 9,200. Their price is getting up there where I would love to play him if the salary works out. I personally prefer using that 9K salary on Devontae Adams, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. But I prefer playing Montgomery, James Robinson, and Austin Eckler as opposed to getting up to Derrick Henry and then having to come down from Adams onto someone like Sterling Shepard or Michael Pittman, someone in that range. I much prefer Dave Montgomery and Devontae Adams to Derrick Henry and Michael Pittman.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth noting that actually for once, running back is actually stronger than receiver. And I mean, I think we both agree that Devontae Adams, like you were saying, undeniably has a higher floor than Derrick Henry. It's not even remotely close. And their ceilings are, equivalent in my opinion. I mean, both of them can hit a 45 pointer any given week, but I think access to that ceiling on the Adams side is a lot more likely. A lot has to go right for Derrick Henry, to end up hitting that 45 spot. Whereas
he's got to get the box 3 times to get 45 points.
Yeah, and he's going to need like 200 yards.
Yeah.
Whereas like Adams, I mean, we've seen Adams do it. I mean, if he goes to like 14 for 160 and gets in the box twice, I mean,
yeah, it's just that's pants off. Yeah.
So
it's moving on to these other running back plays. I think Derrick Henry, we hit him pretty hard here. He's kind of boomer bust. I mean, at that price, he's boomer bust. It's unlikely to me that he hits like exactly what he needs to get. He's either going to go under it or he's going to smash the way the hell over it. I think he's either going to score like 35 or he's going to score like 15 or something like that. I cannot. I don't know. It's tough to see him just getting exactly like 27, which is what he needs to get there. So moving on to my second favorite running back play behind Austin Eckler, and you're going to get to him here in a minute. So I'm going to talk about James Robinson. So you talked about the rushing share that the running back rushing share that Derrick Henry was getting with Tennessee. How about James Robinson? He's had 194 carries this year. Guess the total number of carries by all other Jacksonville running backs. Just guess. So 194 to what?
6.
7. 7 total carries for all other Jacksonville running backs. He is this engine. I know that Jacksonville sucks. All right, I get it. But he's playing 81% of snaps over the last 5. He's averaging 24 touches per game, 116 yards from scrimmage. All this is really solid. Yeah, he doesn't have much touchdown upside, but when they get down there, he's still their guy. He's getting all of the stuff inside the 5. It's just they don't get down inside the 5 very often, so he's not going to score many touchdowns. But he's been really consistent. He's had over 94 yards from scrimmage in each of his last 5 games. And yeah, I get it. They have a 21 implied total. Jacksonville does. They're on the road. They're 10-point dogs. I get all that. They're literally 10-point dogs every week. It doesn't matter. He still smashes. He got there against Pittsburgh. It's just what matters in fantasy is volume, and he gets it in spades. I mean, he gets it. Over the last 5 games, he's averaged 24 touches per game. Derrick Henry's averaged 23.4. Robinson's averaged 116 yards from scrimmage, and Derrick Henry's averaged 121. So, I mean, James Robinson at 7,300, yeah, I mean, obviously Derrick Henry's a much better raw play. Like, yeah, I'd much rather play Derrick Henry if they're the same price. But at this, you get this discount of, 1,900 less than Derrick Henry. I like James Robinson a lot.
Yeah, I'm totally on board. I mean, look at last week. We came off of James Robinson because we were scared of a Mike Glennon-led offense, and it just didn't matter. And it doesn't seem to matter any given week. James Robinson's just good. I think people need to start putting some respect on his name.
Absolutely.
And I think this is the week to get on board, man. I mean, I feel bad that we haven't been playing him more often, but I
I
mean, at
know.
that price tag and that locked in volume, man.
Yeah, I feel like I disrespected him or something like that. Like, I haven't played him at all, which is a clear mistake. I mean, it's a mistake to not have been playing this guy. I kept thinking of Jacksonville. It's like, oh, Jacksonville sucks. They're not going to score. Like, they're going to be losing. But it doesn't matter because even when they're losing, they're still giving him touches. So he just gets there every week.
Yeah, don't care.
And on that kind of volume, I mean, he's playing 80% of the snaps. Like that, he's just out there all the time. So yeah, James Robinson, the volume is just going to pile up between him and David Montgomery. That kind of volume that you're getting at their price tags, I think that's really hard to pass up. Regardless of their matchups.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, the Montgomery thing's still gross, but now playing Robinson with Montgomery makes me feel a little bit better. But anyway, moving on to the last running back, it's going to be Austin Eckler, 7,100.
Yeah.
Man, first week back off the hammy last week was a total smash fest. He had 25 total touches, 16 targets, 11 receptions. He had 3 red zone carries, 2 red zone targets. I mean, he didn't even get in the box, and he easily hit value. So he played 76% of the snaps. He ran 37 routes on Herbert's 52 dropbacks. That's solid. So, man, the workload concerns coming back. Granted, Kalen Balaj was out, but, man, this was everything I wanted and more. And I think he's going to see a pretty healthy ownership percentage this week because of it.
Yeah.
Diving into the matchup a little bit, New England is allowing the 10th fewest points to opposing running backs over the last month, but they are giving up tied for the 4th most receptions to the running back over that same span, which is perfect for Austin Eckler's skill set. It also helps that New England is a little bit beat up on defense. I mean, they've got a lot of key guys who have been limited or out all week. Their rookie Anfernee Jennings, he hasn't practiced all week. He's a backup outside linebacker. J.C. Jackson, he's been limited all week. Kyle Duggar's been limited all week. Jawan Bentley's been limited all week. Adam Butler's limited all week. It's already not a very scary defense in general. So when you take a lot of these depth pieces away, I mean, it just makes it that much of a better spot for Eckler. It also helps that Trey Turner and Brian Bulaga are both lined up to play after being on the injury report. They both practiced in full Thursday. I didn't get to see any data on today, but I assume if they practiced in full yesterday, they're probably out there in full today. So are we going to expect 25 touches, or are we going to expect 16 targets for Austin Eckler? No, I don't think so. But I think something like, 12 to 15 carries and 6 to 8 targets is well in play. I think something, 18 to 22, 23 touches is well in the range of outcomes here. And I think it's 2,100 with, I mean, a lot of that coming through the air. I think he's just too cheap in a game that they're really going to need to rely on him. And I mean, it's essentially, would you play Alvin Kamara at 7,100 if he had Drew Brees? Because that's essentially what this is. Austin Eckler is the new Alvin Kamara. And I think at 7,100, everyone would be, salivating at that play.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Austin Eckler in his 3 full games that he's played with Justin Herbert, so that's week 2, week 3, and then last week, week 12. He's averaged 10.3 targets in those games. He's had 30 targets, and he's averaging 140 yards from scrimmage in those games on 23 touches, and he's playing 67% of the snaps. 25 points per game in those 3 games that he played with Justin Herbert. So Herbert loves to throw it to him. 7,100, that kind of passing game floor is exactly what you're looking for in a cash game running back. And obviously we know the talent of Austin Eckler. He's an absolute stud. So yeah, Austin Eckler is a really solid play. My favorite 3 running back plays on the slate in order. It's Austin Eckler, James Robinson, then David Montgomery, and then Derrick Henry coming in just behind. So
yeah, for my money, I think Austin Eckler's a lot.
Yeah, I would say so too. Yeah, I mean, from the guys we've gone over so far, I think that Aaron Rodgers and Austin Eckler are both locks, I would say. So moving over to wide receiver, I'm going to start at the bottom of the pricing range here, and we can talk about Brandon Cooks and Kiki QT. So with Will Fuller out for the rest of the year, this opens up about 24% of the team's targets. And Kiki QT is this guy. He came out of Texas Tech. This is his third year. Um, and he wasn't really used much early in his career, and he really hasn't been used much at all this year with Will Fuller there. But now, I mean, this is a small guy. He's small. He's fast. He runs a 4.43. So he's a little slot jitterbug type guy. But I mean, he's had 3 games against the Colts in his career. And in those 3 games, now, mind you, these games came with DeAndre Hopkins and Will Fuller on the field. Both of them are gone now. His only competition for targets now is Brandon Cooks. And in those 3 games, he's gone 11 for 109 and 0, 11 for 110 and 1, and then he went 3 for 25 and 0. So he's had some blow up games in this spot at 3,500 with no Will Fuller and seemingly no one else there. I mean, Isaiah Coulter,
Even Mitchell.
Even Mitchell. I mean, these guys haven't even been on the field yet. So I know that the Texans don't love Kiki, but they're going to have to use him. And, Indianapolis, they go up 8.9 yards per target to opposing wide receiver cores. So, I love any wide receiver attached to Deshaun Watson, right? I mean, Deshaun Watson's a total stud, and yeah, losing Will Fuller is going to hurt this offense as a whole. But at 3,500 for a slot jitterbug who could break a little slant across the middle and take it to the house, I don't know. I mean, I like Kiki Cutie in this spot, 3,500.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing: the Texans can't run the ball, and they're certainly not going to be able to run the ball against the Colts. So they're going to be forced to pass, and I don't think Indy's going to have much of a problem at all scoring against Houston's pitiful defense. So um, they're going to continue to do what they've done every week since Bill O'Brien got fired finally, and that's just drop back with Watson and let him do the work. I mean,
Yep.
and yeah, I mean, Randall Cobb out. He's on IR. Kenny Stills was cut, and now Will Fuller is gone. And I think they only have 4 receivers on the roster, 2 of which, Isaiah Coulter and Stephen Mitchell, have not even played a snap this year. So, I mean, they're forced, whether they like Kiki or not. He had a couple cash viable games back in 2018 or something like that. And man, I can't see a way that Kiki's not on the field for almost every drop back. I mean, I think he's a great play at 3,500. I think 8 targets is right there. And anytime you can get 8 targets at a $3,500 price tag, I mean, it's hard to get past that.
Yeah.
So I think he's really strong.
Yep.
And then Brandon Cooks, who's 5,600, he's right in that mid-range at receiver. He's now elevated to the wide receiver 1 in this offense. Now, the Colts are only allowing the 3rd fewest points to opposing receivers over the last month. They're just a really solid defense in general right now. But, I mean, Cooks has shown to be really consistent in his offense. I mean, he's had double-digit fantasy points every week, except for week 5, and he actually had 9.9 that week. He's averaged 16.8 fantasy points a game over that span, which is really, really good, especially as a number 2 in that offense. The last 4 weeks, he's averaged a little less than 7 targets a game. And now there's no Fuller, no Cobb, no Stills, none of them. I mean, the last 4 weeks, like you said, Will Fuller saw a 23.5% target share to Cook's 22.8% of targets over that span. And I think he's probably slotted to get at least 25% of the team targets, if not more. But I certainly think a quarter of the team targets is a solid projection for him. Now, the one thing I wanted to look into was how much he's going to be lined up against Xavier Rhodes, who's been a top 5 corner this year after seemingly being dust in Minnesota last year. But here's the thing. Xavier Rhodes plays 94% of his snaps on the left side, and Cooks only runs 24% of his routes on that side. So I'm guessing that Isaiah Coulter is probably going to be one that gets sacrificed to the Wolves. And Cooks, I mean, he moves around a good bit, but he plays like 40-something% of his snaps on the right side, which is more than likely where he's going to be lined up against Rocky Sin, who's, not been good. I mean, he's gotten cooked by Corey Davis twice this year. He got cooked by T. Higgins. He got cooked by Devontae Adams, Odell Beckham. So I think the matchup is actually a little bit better than it might seem on the surface for Brandon Cooks. I think, as the locked-in wide receiver 1 in a game where they're going to have to drop back a lot, at that price tag, I think 8 to 10 targets is right there to play.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Rocky Ya. He's given 2 yards per route run. I mean, that's a lot. And Brandon Cooks has averaged 1.84 yards per route run. So I mean, that's garbage. I mean, for reference, Xavier Rhodes is even up 0.96 yards per route run. So, and Kenny Moore that plays a slot is going to 0.98. So I mean, Rocky Ya, if Brandon Cooks is going to run most of his routes against Rocky Ya, I mean that's really a mismatch for Brandon Cooks. But I mean, wide receiver quarterback matchups are so guys move around so much that it's hard to really pin down unless it's a true shadow matchup. Um, but yeah, I just wanted to shed a little bit of light there on Rocky Ya. He's gotten his ass beat all year. So yeah, Brandon Cooks and Kiki both are perfectly fine if you have the salary to go up to Brandon Cooks. Um, obviously he's the preferred option if you can get up to him. But if you can't, I mean, I really like Kiki Cutie in this spot. So
Yeah, I think most lineups are probably going to have one of the two. I think most lineups will have Kiki or Cooks.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so the reason I like Kiki is because he allows you to get up to someone like Devontae Adams. So I talked about Devontae Adams when we were talking about Derrick Henry. Now Devontae Adams, he's not going to project well in the spot point per dollar wise because the guy is 9K, right? I mean, so he's going to project for somewhere around the 21 Draftkings points, which is obviously not great value, but he has scored a touchdown in 6 straight games, and he has at least 6 receptions in all 8 of his full games that he's played without leaving to injury. So we mentioned his floor. That floor is ridiculous. I mean, if he catches 6 balls, that if that's his floor, which it has been all year, catching 6 balls, that's probably going to give him around like 60 yards. That's 12 points. It's a 12-point floor. Derrick Henry does not have a 12-point floor. Derrick Henry's floor is more so around like 8 or 9. If he doesn't get in the box, he's getting you like maybe 80, 90 yards. He might get to the bonus. I mean, you can't expect the guy to run for 100 yards every game. That's just you can't project that, and no one's going to project him for over 100 yards. They're probably projecting him for like 90, 95, something like that. But anyway, back to Devontae Adams. So he's at home. We mentioned Aaron Rodgers, 28 implied total. Devontae Adams has averaged 26 DraftKings points per game over his last 5. He's averaging 10.6 targets per game, of 0.79 weighted opportunity rating, which is a combination of air yard share and market share of targets. He's averaged 92 yards from scrimmage per game, and he averages 0.9 end zone targets per game. That is a really, really solid number. I mean, you look at the average wide receiver, and most wide receivers average like 0.4 end zone targets per game. He's way above that. We know he's their guy in the red zone. He's averaging like 44% of the team's targets in the red zone. So when they get down close, they're throwing to Devontae. And the connection, I think there's something that actually maybe it's narrative based, but something that definitely matters, I think, is that the connection between Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers. These two have a true connection where they can just look at each other and say, okay, I want to run this option route and it's going to be there every time. And they just look at each other in the huddle and say, okay, this is the play. And go for it. I mean, the back shoulder fades. These guys they have the chemistry down. They've been doing it for years. 9K, like I said, I'd rather spend the 9K on Devontae Adams, stack him with Aaron Rodgers, and take my chances with Kiki Cutie to open up that salary for me. What do you think about Devontae?
No, I mean, he's hands down the best receiver in the league right now. I mean, about as bust proof as they come. He's pretty much this year's Michael Thomas. And I mean, not that it, I don't know how much it really affects his production because I don't think any corner can really cover him. But man, if Darius Slay's out, that's just a cherry on top for this matchup. Darius Slay can't cover him, but I knew for a fact he would cook every other corner on the Eagles pretty badly.
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, when he played the Eagles last year, it was real bad for the secondary in Philly. So, yeah, man. I mean, access to his ceiling, like we said, access to his ceiling is, I think, a lot more likely than access to Derrick Henry's ceiling. Like we said, so much has to go right for Derrick Henry to pop. I mean, he's going to need 200 yards and 3 touchdowns to really break this slate. Whereas, that's not how we're going to get to Adams' slate. I mean, how many times have we seen Adams go, 12 for 150 and 2? Like,
Yeah.
that is much more accessible than a 200 yards 3 touchdown game from Derrick Henry. And like we said, running back is actually stronger on this slate than receiver, which is something that we have not seen too often this year. And so I think paying up for a guy like Adams and, slotting in someone like David Montgomery or Devontae Booker, whoever you want to pay down at running back for, I think makes for a stronger lineup construction.
Yeah. One thing I want to one more thing on Adams with his inside of 10 usage. He's getting 37.5% of the Green Bay targets inside the 10. The next closest is the touchdown machine himself, Mike Evans. I mean, we know all Mike Evans does is catch touchdowns. He gets 34% of the team's targets inside the 10-yard line. So like when they get down low, it's going to Adams. And if you get an end zone target inside the 10, that is you probably have about a 60% chance of scoring that if you get that kind of target. So Devontae Adams, like I mentioned, he scored in 6 straight games. I mean, the thing is for Adams, it's way easier for him to get to value than Henry. Henry has to score twice to get to value. Adams can go 8 for 101, and that's 27 points, and you're there. Henry's got to score twice if he's not going to catch any passes. So,
yeah, I mean, I played Adams a couple weeks ago, and he had actually a bad game production wise. I think he had like 7 for 57, but he scored 3 times, so it didn't matter. So even in a down game, he probably will get in the box anyway, so it doesn't even matter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So moving on to another guy is Allen Robinson, and I'm going to throw Anthony Miller in this conversation as well. A Rob's at 6.8K. Anthony Miller is at 3.1. Starting out with A Rob, simply put, the Lions defense is atrocious, and A Rob's an alpha. And what do we like to do? We like to get alpha receivers in our cash lineups. Over the last 4 weeks, the Lions are allowing the 6th most points to opposing receivers. The 2nd most receiving yards given up over that span as well. The past 2 weeks, they've given up the 2nd most points to opposing wide receivers, 54.5 points a game. Man, that's 10 points higher than the Jets, who have been giving up 45 points a game over that span. And they're the 3rd highest. Now, it is worth noting that A-Rob did miss practice on Friday with a knee injury. So that's definitely something we need to monitor as the weekend progresses. And another reason that he is more palatable is that Darnell Mooney missed Friday's practice with a knee. He did not practice while A-Rob was limited. So if Mooney were to be out, that's an added boost to A-Rob. Mooney's air yard market share has been really, really solid this year. So, you take that number 2 target away from that offense, and I think it just opens so much up for A-Rob and Anthony Miller. Especially when the $3,100 price tag for Anthony Miller. And we don't need to go on a tangent about how much I'm in love with Anthony Miller as a player, but man, anytime I can get an Anthony Miller boom week, man, I'm all over that. But I digress. Back to A-Rob. Like I said, he's a bona fide alpha. The last 4 weeks, he's had a 26% team target market share, 24% of the team targets in the red zone over the last month, which is really solid. He's averaging 9.5 targets per game over the last 4. And if we delve a little bit deeper and look at weeks 1 through 3, and then last week, week 12, those were the 4 games that Mitch Trubisky was the starting quarterback. In those games, Allen Robinson saw a 28% team target share, 30.6% of the air yards from weeks 1 to 3, only 20% last week, but that's because Darnell Mooney accounted for 36% of those air yards. Now, if Darnell Mooney's out, that opens up a lot for this offense. So that's definitely something that might, swing the pendulum in A-Rob's direction. Those 4 games with Mitch Trubisky, A-Rob saw 7 red zone targets. That is elite. That is ridiculous. And a .62 Whopper, which is really solid as well. It also provides a little bit of leverage against the David Montgomery chalk, which is something that I'm always interested in. And then, of course, Miller becomes a really, really strong play if Mooney's out. He slots into that number 2 role, should see an expanded target share, and, close to min price. That's the kind of play that, if you wanted to play Brandon Cooks instead of Kiki Kuti, you can still find that value with Anthony Miller. Without having to sacrifice at another position. So I think it sets up pretty nicely. It's just got to monitor the Mooney news and see if he's going to suit up or not on Sunday.
Yeah, Anthony Miller was a great prospect coming out of Memphis, and of course, at 3,100, if Mooney's out, that's really tough to pass up. I think I still prefer Cutie if I'm playing Montgomery, because I don't want to get two Bears in the same lineup. I might just have to like self exclude on DraftKings if I have to play two Bears in the same lineup. I just throw up all over my computer screen. But
Here's the thought, and I haven't even actually tried this myself, but I wonder if you were to play Anthony Miller and Kiki Cootie, if you could fit Adams and Henry in.
probably, yeah, you probably could.
Probably leaves you a little thin at receiver, but
Yeah.
I'll probably fool around with that a little bit.
Yeah, so I want to talk about one more wide receiver just real quick before we move on to tight end. And it's going to be Robert Woods. So Robert Woods is definitely one of the best values on this slate. He's 5,900, so he's $200 cheaper than Cooper Kupp. The Rams are in this potential shootout here with Arizona if Kyler Murray can get his shoulder back on right. So the Rams have a 26 implied total in Arizona here. The Rams over the last 3 weeks on early downs in the first half, they're throwing the ball 63% of the time. I mentioned before, league average is right around like 54%. So that's really solid. They're leaning towards the air more often than not here. Robert Woods has averaged 19 points per game over the last 5 weeks. He's averaged 10.3 targets per game and 86 yards from scrimmage. And I say yards from scrimmage because he's actually getting a couple carries, which gives him an extra point or two here and there, which certainly helps. At 5,900. And taking on this Arizona defense, they're actually decent, against the pass. They only give up 7.7 yards per target, but they do give up a 68% catch rate. So it helps in PPR to have a higher catch rate. I just think 10.3 targets, if he can get, if he's probably projecting for anywhere between like 8 to 10 targets. If he can get 10 targets in this spot at 5,900, I will take that all day and I'll run to the bank. And in 2 games against Arizona last year, in 2019, so he went 13 for 170 and 0 in one of the games, and then he went 7 for 67 and 1 on 30 targets combined between those 2 games. So he's destroyed this defense. He's most likely going to be locking up with Patrick Peterson a good amount. And Robert Woods does move around to the slot a little bit. Patrick Peterson sucks at this point. He's dusted out. He used to be an all-pro. He's completely dusted out. So Robert Woods in this spot, I do really like him at 5,900.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's definitely the best value in this Rams offense this week. Projected shootout spot. Interestingly enough, I know that ownership projections that I'm looking at currently have Woods and Kupp a little bit above 15%, and Kupp actually edging out Woods. I don't think that's that accurate. Granted, it's only Friday night, and a lot of things have to adjust. But I think recency bias is probably going to sway people towards Robert Woods, especially when he has that $200 discount compared to Kupp. So I think that the ownership for Woods is actually going to be higher than we're seeing in projections right now, and I don't think Kupp's going to be that owned in general. Now, maybe people get enamored with the Cooper Kupp upside, but I think Robert Woods is much safer week in, week out. Yeah, Cooper Kupp could absolutely explode. We've seen him do it this year, but he could also end up, 3 for 45 or something, and that just kills you. Whereas I don't even think that's Robert Woods' floor in this kind of spot. I really don't think Robert Woods is going to have less than 5 receptions or so. And if it does shoot out, and he has seen some really good touchdown regression from last year. I think he has 7 TDs on the season. So if that continues, man, he sets up to be a really, really good play.
Yeah, absolutely. This game, it's the fastest paced game on the slate, so it could shoot out. In his recent history here against Arizona, just really solid. So, yeah. So my favorite plays at wide receiver on this slate are Devontae up top, Robert Woods, and then if you're going down low, Kiki Cutie. And you can definitely go down to Anthony Miller if Mooney is out. You can go up to Brandon Cooks, and Allen Robinson is definitely in play too. Just keep tabs on his injury, and hopefully he can play. Hopefully he's good to go on Sunday. He is questionable right now, so it's kind of scary. A guy goes from full practice down to limited on a Friday. It's not always good. That means something happened during the week. So moving on to tight end, we're not even going to talk about these guys up top. We're going straight down to the bottom. We do not play these guys up top because it doesn't matter. Tight ends don't matter unless your name is Travis Kelce. Even if you're Darren Waller, you still don't matter. It just doesn't. So we are going to punt it off all the way. Jonnu Smith, as we mentioned at the top, is out. Anthony and Meffin Ferkser. So in week 6, when Jonnu got hurt after 42% of the snaps, Anthony Ferkser came in and he played 60% of snaps, ran 28 routes, and he went 8 for 113 and 1 versus Houston. Cleveland, I know. If you get 8 for 113 and 1, I mean, it is pants off. And you called it that week, too. I remember you called Anthony Ferkser, and he went the hell off. Now, I mean, that's because of Johnny's injury. But now we're getting a start for Anthony Ferkser at the Stoneman 2,500 at home, in a game with a 30 implied total, faster paced game here against Cleveland. This game can start to shoot out. It's going to be pants off for Ferkser. I mean, the guy, he's out of Stanford, and he's taking on Cleveland, who over the last 3 weeks, they've allowed 4 touchdowns to go to tight ends. I mean, they give up 16 DraftKings points per game to opposing tight ends, a 70% catch rate. They're 23rd DVOA against the pass. I think that it is just a total. I don't want to say lock for a 2,500 tight end, but I'm either playing him or Rudolph. I'll tell you that. I'm playing one or the other. Whichever
he's a lock. No, he is a lock.
He's
he is.
Anthony Ferkser.
No, I get excited about these min-price tight ends. I mean,
I love them.
Just to add what you said, Cleveland the last 4 weeks, Cleveland's given up the second most points to tight ends, a little 19.9 points a game over the last 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So they've sucked with tight ends all year. They over the course of the season, they've allowed the second most points to tight ends. It's just gotten even worse over the last 4 weeks or so. I mean, like we said, they have a 30 implied total. I mean, a min-price starting tight end and the highest total in the week. I mean, come on. I mean, it's just a total lock. It opens up access to guys like Devontae Adams, Derrick Henry. There's just no opportunity cost at tight end. There's no reason to even think about anyone not named Travis Kelce. You can throw in TJ Hawkinson, but he's usually too expensive. So, and Zach Ertz is at least interesting at 3.9K this week, but I just don't care. Like, if I get a starting tight end at 2,500 in a game where they have an implied team total of 30, I'm locking it in and I'm not thinking twice. So
absolutely,
I will not be pivoting from Anthony for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you have the salary, which, if you're paying up for Henry or for Adams, I don't know how you have the salary, but it's just say if you do, at 3,400, Irv Smith is out. So Kyle Rudolph, we played him last week at 2,800. So now we get Kyle Rudolph again. And over the last 2 weeks without Irv, he's ran a route on 78% of dropbacks and then 76% of dropbacks. And he's produced lines of 4 for 63 and 0, and then 7 for 68 and 0. And Jacksonville, I mean, this Jacksonville defense is absolute garbage. They're 31st DVOA. They give up 14 fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends, and they give up 8.7 yards per target when league average points per target or yards per target given up is 7.5. So this is one of the worst defenses in the NFL. It really just comes down to, are the Vikings going to throw enough to give Rudolph enough volume? As we know, Adam Thielen is back in this game, so he's likely third, maybe fourth on the target totem pole here behind Dalvin Cook even. So 3,400, I much prefer Anthony Ferkser at $900 cheaper. I much prefer it. Just play the minimum price guy and move on. It's tight end. It sucks. It sucks.
Yeah, I think Rudolph he's the second best player on the slate, I think, at tight end. 3,400, no Irv Smith. I mean, and I think it might give you a little bit of leverage because I do think that Jefferson and Thielen are both going to see cash game ownership. Right now, Jefferson's actually projected to be pretty highly owned. I don't know how accurate that is. I can't imagine he'll be all that high owned with Thielen back.
Yeah.
And if people do end up playing Dalvin, that gives you even more leverage onto Rudolph. So I think he's totally fine. But yeah, I mean, it's just Anthony Ferkser at 2,500. Just play him. Like,
yeah. I mean, he's an objectively great play. At home, 30 implied total. We want tight ends that have massive totals. Both Rudolph and Ferkser have implied totals over 30 right now. So, yeah, there's a
Here's
lot
the
of touchdown.
thing. I've said this before. If Anthony Ferguson hits a goose egg, it doesn't really hurt you that much because he's
2,500. Who
25.
cares? We're getting a starting tight
We
end who's
both
going to
played
run a
Adam
route.
Troutman. We both played Adam Troutman a week that he put up a goose egg and it didn't matter. We both cashed easily. You know,
It's
I mean,
what
we
it
played
opens
that
up for you.
Alberto. Alberto's gotten me one catch. One was some week that I played him, and it didn't matter. Like, there's just no opportunity calls at tight end. I mean, what are the odds that Darren Waller smashes? I mean, he's mid 5 to 6K tight end. It's not like he's just an absolute smash fest. I mean, last week he got outscored by Kyle Rudolph, who was $3,000 cheaper than him. So, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
that's just the status of tight end this year.
I also do want to note that Anthony Ferguson, he missed practice on Wednesday and Thursday for it was like not injury related, but then he practiced in full today. So I guess it was some kind of personal reason, but he was there, practiced in full. He's good to go. It should be the Ferguson show, a little bit of Jeff Swaim in there blocking, but shouldn't get many routes. Swaim's going to run probably 5 or 10 routes. Ferguson should get the bulk of the routes, probably run 25 to 30 routes. In this spot, 2,500, I'm just going to go with it. Anthony Ferguson's the windmill of the slate. Total windmill. Lock it up. Anthony Ferguson, 2 tutties at 2,500. He's probably gonna be the highest owned tight end on the slate. Probably him or Rudolph. If I were to guess in cash games, people love to pay down a tight end. I think people have kind of caught on. I know that we were. I mean, you've been paying down a tight end for years. It's like I've caught on to it this year, and it's just like you just have to do it. It just doesn't matter. Just pray for a touchdown, really. And really, you just don't need much for a guy. 2,500. You don't need much from your tight end. You need like what? Well, if he catches a touchdown, he can catch one ball, catch a touchdown, and you're there, and it's pants off. But if he doesn't catch a touchdown, if he gets like, I don't know, 3 catches for like 30 yards, that gets you 6 points. He's 2,500. Nah, who cares? Fine. It's perfectly fine. It's what it opens up for the rest of your lineup. But I'm calling it Anthony Ferguson, 2 touchdowns, 2,500. Anthony Ferguson is going to put up 18 DraftKings points. Book it. So
that's spicy. I like.
So with that, that's going to do it for episode 15 of the PrintFest DFS podcast. We'll be back on Monday night breaking down our lineups. It's going to have Anthony Ferguson in there, and you're going to see an 18 burger from 2,500. You're going to see it in both of our lineups in cash, and hopefully we don't get the doors blown off us like I did last week. And we'll see what happens. But hopefully Derrick Henry. If I don't play Derrick Henry and he just totally jams it down my throat, so be it. I'm likely playing Devontae Adams instead of Derrick Henry. If it burns me, it burns me. I mean, God, we'll see. Well, I hope Ferguson cucks all the touchdowns from Derrick Henry this week. That's what I'll say. With that, that's going to.
And I mean, stay tuned on Monday night. David Montgomery cost me money.
I know. Yeah.
David Montgomery cost me money. I don't know what I'll do.
Yeah. We'll be back Monday night. Until then, good luck, everybody.